Below is your adapted story, rewritten in English, shifted to a US setting, expanded with detail, and presented in third-person indirect narrative while keeping the core idea but adding originality. The downtown district of Seattle looked alive even past midnight, glowing under neon signs and flickering streetlights. Yet not every corner of the city shared that brightness. Just a few blocks away from the crowded avenues, narrow alleyways stretched into silence, places where even the hum of the city seemed to fade away. On one such night, around 1 a.m., a 21-year-old woman named Akara was making her way home. She had just finished her night shift at a small diner near the subway station and, as usual, chose to walk the remaining distance to her apartment. It had become routine for her. Headphones in her bag, keys clenched between her fingers, steps quick and purposeful. Still, tonight felt different. The main streets had been bright, almost comforting. But the moment she turned into the narrow alley that cut between two old brick buildings, the atmosphere shifted. The lights here were dim, some flickering, others completely dead. The silence felt unnatural, pressing in on her from all sides. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement, echoing louder than they should have. And then she noticed something else, another set of footsteps. At first, she tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just the echo of her own steps bouncing off the walls. But the sound didn't match her rhythm. It lagged, then caught up, then lagged again. Her breathing grew shallow. She stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. Slowly she turned around. Nothing. Just darkness stretching behind her, swallowing the alley whole. No movement, no shadow, no one. A chill ran down her spine, but she forced herself to keep moving. She told herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the night, a result of exhaustion. But just as she took a few steps forward, she froze. Standing a few feet ahead of her, as if it had appeared out of nowhere, was a girl. The figure wore a long black coat that reached almost to her knees. Her hair, long, dark, and silky, hung loosely, partially covering her face. But what stood out the most was the mask. A pale white mask, unnaturally smooth, hiding everything beneath it. Akara's heart began to pound violently in her chest. She wanted to speak, but her voice trembled before it could form words. The girl tilted her head slightly. Then, in a calm, almost hollow voice, she asked if she was beautiful. The question felt wrong, completely out of place. It didn't sound like curiosity. It sounded like a test. Akara's throat went dry. She thought about the rumors she had been hearing all week, stories spreading across social media about a mysterious masked woman appearing late at night, asking strangers a single question. Some said she was just an urban myth. Others weren't so sure. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move. She stuttered, saying she didn't know, that she couldn't answer, that she just wanted to go home. Panic filled her voice as she begged to be let go. The masked girl slowly lifted her hands and began removing the mask. What Akara saw next shattered her completely. She screamed and collapsed onto the cold pavement, her body trembling uncontrollably. She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head, insisting she hadn't seen anything, that she didn't know what the girl looked like. Then suddenly, laughter, light, familiar laughter. The tension snapped. Akara slowly opened her eyes. Standing in front of her was not a ghost, not a monster, but her roommate, Anna. Anna pulled the mask completely off, revealing a wide grin. She apologized between laughs, admitting that she had only been playing a prank. She had dressed up like the so-called slit-mouth woman, a figure from urban legends, just to scare her. Akara's fear quickly turned into anger. She shouted at Anna, telling her it wasn't funny, that she could have had a heart attack. The rumors had already been terrifying enough, and this had pushed her over the edge. She stormed off, refusing to speak to her despite Anna's repeated apologies. Days passed. The incident slowly faded, though the uneasiness never completely left her. Then one night, Anna found herself alone. It was her turn to work the late shift. Around the same time, just past 1 a.m., she stepped out of the subway station and began walking back toward the apartment. The streets were quieter than usual, the wind colder. As she walked, she noticed something strange. Her shadow. Under the street light, her shadow stretched long across the pavement, but there was another shadow behind it, taller, broader. Closing in, Anna slowed her steps. She tried to listen for footsteps behind her. Nothing, no sound, no movement. And yet, the shadow kept coming closer. Her pulse quickened. She turned around. A figure stood just a few steps away. A girl, long coat, dark hair drifting in the wind, and a white mask. This time, the alley felt even colder. Anna felt a bead of sweat roll down her forehead as realization struck her. Now she understood. The figure tilted its head, just like before, and in the same hollow voice, it asked her if it was beautiful. But this time, it wasn't a prank. Anna let out a nervous laugh, trying to mask the unease building inside her. She told the figure that it had to be a joke, that it was just her getting back at her for that prank a few nights ago. Her voice carried forced confidence as she said the girl was beautiful, insisting there was no need to wander the streets at midnight just to ask such a question. She added that she would have been back at the apartment soon anyway. The figure didn't react. It simply repeated the same question. It asked again if it was beautiful. Something in the tone had changed. The air felt heavier. Then, slowly, deliberately, the girl reached up and removed the white mask from her face. For a brief second, Anna stood there smiling, still clinging to the belief that this was all part of some elaborate joke. But the moment the mask came off, her expression collapsed. Her heart seemed to leap into her throat as the reality in front of her replaced every ounce of denial. The face beneath the mask was wrong, horribly wrong. The woman's mouth had been sliced wide open, stretching from one corner of her jaw to the other, almost touching her ears. Torn flesh hung unevenly, smeared with thick, dark blood. Her teeth were exposed in a grotesque, permanent grin, stained deep red. Her eyes burned with something far worse than anger. It was hatred, pure and consuming, like she had been waiting, watching, choosing. Anna's legs began to tremble uncontrollably. Before she could even think of moving, the woman slipped her hand into the pocket of her long coat and pulled out something metallic, a pair of scissors. The blades gleamed faintly under the weak streetlight. She began to open and close them slowly. Snip, snip, snip. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the silent alley. That was enough. Anna didn't wait. She turned and ran. Her breath came in sharp, panicked bursts as she sprinted blindly, her footsteps slamming against the pavement. She didn't care where she was going, only that she needed to get away. But just as she turned into another narrow stretch, something dropped in front of her. She stopped so abruptly she nearly fell. Floating in midair, just inches from her face, was a head, a severed head. The same torn mouth stretched into that horrifying smile. Its hair drifted as if underwater, its eyes locked onto hers. Anna screamed, a raw, desperate sound, as her entire body gave in to terror. Tears streamed down her face as she begged, her voice breaking, asking to be spared, asking what she had done to deserve this. Then, as if reality itself had broken, the rest of the body appeared. It drifted forward through the air, unnatural and weightless, before attaching itself seamlessly beneath the floating head. The woman stood whole again, and she was closer now, much closer, still holding the scissors. The blades clicked again as she tilted her head, almost curiously. She reminded Anna that she had just called her beautiful. Then, in a cold, twisted tone, she said that if Anna truly believed that, then she should become beautiful too, just like her. Anna shook her head violently, backing away, her voice cracking as she screamed that she had been wrong. She said the woman wasn't beautiful at all, that her face was horrifying, unbearable to even look at. The moment those words left her mouth, everything changed. The woman froze. The air went completely still, then slowly, her head lowered. Her voice, when it came again, was no longer calm. It trembled with fury. She repeated Anna's words, asking if she truly believed she wasn't beautiful. Then she lifted her head again, and this time, her eyes held something even darker. She said that if she wasn't beautiful, then no one in the city deserved to be. Anna tried to run again, but she wasn't fast enough. The woman lunged forward, the scissors flashed in the dark, and then a scream tore through the night, a scream so loud, so filled with agony that it seemed to shake the silence of the entire neighborhood. Lights flickered on in nearby buildings, windows opened, people stirred from their sleep. By the time anyone reached the alley, it was over. Anna's body lay motionless on the cold ground, surrounded by spreading pools of blood. The walls of the alley were splattered red, the scene so brutal it made people turn away in horror. Her face, no one could look at it for long. It had been carved, twisted into something unrecognizable, something unnatural, and yet there was no sign of the attacker, no footsteps, no weapon left behind, no trace, just silence. By morning, the story had spread across all of Seattle like wildfire. News reports, social media posts, whispered conversations. Everyone spoke of the same thing: a masked woman, a question asked in the dead of night, and a fate worse than death for those who answered wrong. After Anna's death, people no longer walked alone through the quiet streets. The once busy alleys were abandoned after dark. Even the brightest parts of the city felt colder, heavier, and somewhere, in the shadows between streetlights, a figure still wandered, waiting for the next answer. After several brutal deaths, the authorities in Seattle found themselves chasing nothing but shadows. There were no witnesses who could provide a clear description, no fingerprints, no weapon left behind, not even a pattern that made sense to investigators. Each victim was found in a similar state, faces mutilated beyond recognition, bodies left in narrow alleys or deserted streets. But the motive remained a complete mystery. Detectives debated endlessly. Some believed it was the work of a highly disturbed serial killer. Others argued it was something far more calculated. But among the locals, a different explanation began to spread, one that didn't belong to logic or reason. People whispered that this was not the work of a human at all. They said it was her, the woman in the mask, the one who asked a single question before deciding your fate. As fear tightened its grip on the city, an old story resurfaced, an urban legend that had crossed oceans and generations, now reborn in a modern city. They called her the Slit-Mouth Woman. Long before the killings began, she had once been known as a woman of extraordinary beauty, the kind of beauty that made people stop mid-sentence, the kind that turned heads wherever she went. But beauty, as it turned out, had become her curse. Her husband, a man consumed by jealousy, had grown paranoid. He feared that others admired her too much, that she would one day leave him. Slowly, his love twisted into control. He isolated her, forbade her from speaking to others, and kept her confined within the walls of their home. When he was eventually called away for military duty, he locked her inside, warning her never to step out. But loneliness has a way of breaking even the strongest resolve. Over time, she found comfort in someone else, a young man who offered her the attention and warmth she had been denied. And one night, her husband returned unexpectedly. What he saw shattered whatever remained of his sanity. Blinded by rage, he grabbed a pair of scissors lying nearby, and in a fit of uncontrollable fury, slashed her face open, cutting her mouth from ear to ear, destroying the very beauty he had once been obsessed with. She died that night, but her story didn't end. It changed. Now, she wandered, not as a woman, but as something else entirely, something driven by a twisted hunger for validation and revenge. As the killings continued, one man decided that fear was no longer an option. A spiritual practitioner named Hoshima believed that if the entity was bound to a question, then perhaps it could also be stopped by confronting it directly. Armed with old rituals, protective charms, and a small pouch of blessed salt, he stepped out into the city at midnight, determined to face whatever haunted its streets. The night felt unusually still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He walked through empty blocks and silent intersections until he reached a narrow alley, swallowed almost entirely by darkness. That was when he saw it. A shadow. At first, it looked like nothing more than a distortion in the dim light. But then it moved, slowly, toward him. Hoshima tightened his grip around the talisman in his hand, the rough edges pressing into his skin. With the other hand, he held the salt, ready. The shadow took form. A woman, long coat, flowing hair, white mask. As she stepped closer, the temperature dropped sharply, the air turning cold enough to sting his lungs. Then came the voice, soft, echoing. It asked him if it was beautiful. Hoshima didn't answer. The question came again, louder this time, demanding. And before he could react, she let out a piercing scream and tore the mask from her face. The sight would have broken most men. The torn flesh, the blood-darkened grin, the unnatural stillness of her eyes. It was a vision pulled straight from nightmares. For a brief moment, even Hoshima faltered, but he forced himself to act. Muttering a chant under his breath, he threw the salt and the talisman directly at her. The moment they touched her, she screamed, not like before. This scream was deeper, raw, filled with something ancient and furious. The air around them seemed to crack as a thick fog began to spread rapidly through the alley. The cold intensified, wrapping around everything like a living thing. And then she was gone, vanished, as if she had never been there. In the days that followed, something changed. The killings stopped. No new bodies were found. No new reports surfaced. The city, though still shaken, began to breathe again. People slowly returned to their routines. The fear didn't disappear, but it softened, becoming just another story whispered late at night. Many believed that Hoshima had succeeded, that his ritual had freed the restless spirit, that the nightmare was finally over, and for a while, it truly seemed that way. But deep within the quiet corners of Seattle, where streetlights flicker and shadows stretch just a little too far, something still waits, unanswered, unfinished. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was the calm before something far worse. Hoshima didn't realize it yet. One night, well past midnight, he found himself walking through a deserted alley once again in Seattle. The air was still, almost unnaturally so. At first, everything seemed normal, but then something felt wrong. The alley didn't end. He kept walking, expecting to reach the street beyond, but the path only stretched further ahead. The walls on either side seemed to shift subtly, closing in and pulling away at the same time. The faint glow of the streetlights behind him had vanished. He was completely alone, or so it seemed. His breathing grew heavier as he continued forward, his footsteps echoing strangely as if the space itself had become hollow. Panic slowly began to creep into his chest. Then, a voice right behind him, cold, familiar. It told him that he had betrayed her, that betrayal deserved only one punishment, death, and that she had returned, not just to kill, but to unleash something so terrifying that the entire city would be left watching in horror. Hoshima jolted awake. He was back in his room, drenched in sweat. His heart pounded violently as he tried to steady his breath. It had been a dream, but it didn't feel like one. It felt like a warning, or worse, a promise. He whispered to himself that if even a part of that vision became real, it would bring unimaginable destruction. The next night, the horror took a new form. A young woman named Masato sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through videos on her phone. The room was quiet, dimly lit, nothing unusual, until her phone screen suddenly went black. She frowned, tapping it lightly. Then, the screen flickered back on. But instead of her video, a face appeared. A woman's face, torn from jaw to ear, blood-stained teeth exposed in a grotesque grin. It was her, the masked woman, now unmasked. Masato froze. Before she could react, the figure on the screen let out a piercing scream. Masato dropped her phone in terror, and then the glass cracked. A sharp, unnatural sound echoed through the room as fractures spread across the screen. Something began to push through from the inside, and in the next moment, she was no longer inside the phone. She was standing in the room, right in front of Masato. The next morning, the apartment was sealed off. The walls were splattered with blood. Masato's body lay motionless on the floor, her face brutally carved, almost identical to the previous victims. But there was one detail that made it even more disturbing. The door had been locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had entered or left. Panic spread across the city. Reports flooded in from every corner of Seattle. People were no longer just dying in alleys. They were dying inside their homes, in front of mirrors, in front of phone screens, in front of computers. It didn't matter where they were. If they saw her, she could reach them. During one investigation, a shaken man revealed that his sister had died the same way just 2 days earlier. He said his uncle had heard glass shattering from inside the bathroom. They had knocked on the door repeatedly, but she never opened it. They heard her screams, desperate, begging for help, and then silence. When they finally broke the door open, she was already gone, her face destroyed, as if someone had carved it with scissors. The pattern was undeniable now. This was no longer a series of isolated incidents. It was spreading, fast, uncontrollable. Hoshima stood in the middle of it all, the weight of realization crushing him. He felt that she was provoking him, that she was showing him something. He had tried to stop her once, and now she was proving that his efforts had meant nothing. If anything, she had grown stronger, more dangerous, more present. He whispered that this had started with him, and it would have to end with him. That night, he returned to the same alley, the same place where he had first faced her. The darkness there felt deeper now, heavier, almost alive. He stepped forward and called out to her. His voice echoed into the void. He waited. The air turned cold. The shadows shifted. And somewhere, just beyond sight, something answered. Moments passed in silence. Then suddenly, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, but violently. A freezing wind swept through the narrow alley in Seattle, so cold that even breathing began to hurt. The faint streetlights above flickered erratically, buzzing as if struggling to stay alive. The darkness thickened, and then she appeared, standing just a few feet in front of Hoshima. The long coat swayed slightly in the unnatural wind. Her hair drifted across her face, and the pale white mask gleamed faintly under the broken light. The question came again, cold, unchanging. She asked if she was beautiful. This time, Hoshima did not hesitate. He stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, and firm, cutting through the cold air like a blade. He told her that beauty was never meant to decide a person's worth. Whether someone was considered beautiful or not, every individual had the right to live their life freely, on their own terms. He continued, saying that her husband had not destroyed her because of her beauty alone, but because of his own madness, his jealousy, his need to control what he could never truly possess. He said the man she had loved had seen her true self, her heart, not her face, and that was something no blade could ever destroy. Hoshima's words echoed in the alley. For a moment, everything went still. Then suddenly, she screamed. A deafening, agonizing scream that seemed to tear through the air itself. She clutched her head with both hands, shaking violently, as if his words were piercing something deep inside her. She couldn't bear it. She didn't want to hear it. But he didn't stop. He told her to let go, to free herself from the hatred that had trapped her. He said her beauty had never been her enemy. It was the madness of the man who killed her that had taken her life. And now, she had taken countless innocent lives in return. He told her the truth she had been running from, that she wasn't beautiful anymore, not because of her face, but because of what she had become. With that, Hoshima reached into his bag and pulled out a small, polished mirror, a sacred mirror. He raised it slowly and held it in front of her. For the first time, she saw herself, not as she remembered, but as she truly was, her face torn, blood-soaked, twisted into something monstrous. The reflection did not lie. It showed her everything, the pain, the rage, the destruction she had caused. For a brief second, her scream turned into something else, something broken, something human. Then, her form began to shake violently. The edges of her body started dissolving, breaking apart like smoke caught in a storm. The cold wind intensified, swirling around her as if trying to pull her away from existence itself. Her final scream echoed through the alley, louder than anything before, and then she was gone, reduced to nothing but drifting smoke that slowly faded into the night. Silence returned. The cold lifted, the lights stabilized, and for the first time in many nights, the alley felt empty. In the days that followed, something changed once again in Seattle. No more deaths, no more sightings, no more whispers of a masked woman in the dark. The fear that had once gripped the city slowly began to fade. People stepped out at night again. Life returned, cautious at first, but steady. Authorities never found an explanation, no evidence, no suspect, just a series of unsolved cases that suddenly stopped. Hoshima, however, knew the truth, or at least, he believed he did. He told himself that she had finally been freed, that the mirror had forced her to confront what she had become, and in doing so, had broken the curse. But sometimes, late at night, when the streets fall silent, and the glow of a screen reflects faintly in the dark, some people claim they still hear a voice, soft, distant, waiting, asking the same question. Am I beautiful? If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dark, mysterious, horror, and haunting tales.